Ali Kemp was a vibrant 19-year-old, brimming with youthful aspiration. She was intelligent and remarkably compassionate. Those who knew her described Ali as a lively, self-reliant daughter, yet her destiny was tragically unjust. On the afternoon of June 18, 2002, Ali's father drove urgently to the local pool where she worked part-time. He arrived around 5:30 to search for his missing daughter. In anguish, he encountered a horrifying sight beneath a blue tarp. "I saw something. I had to lift the tarp and it was Ali. 911, what is your emergency?" "I think my daughter's been murdered. Does it appear that she's breathing? I can't tell." "Okay, stay on the phone. Are you there? There is a monster loose in our community. We need to get him off the streets." He had started to fight with Ali, but I was going to finish it. In 2002, Ali had just returned home for summer vacation following her freshman year of college. Her family resided in Leawood, a suburb regarded as one of the most secure areas in Kansas, where residents rarely locked their doors and nothing truly severe had ever occurred. She worked part-time as a lifeguard at the community pool, trading shifts with her older brother to earn supplementary income for college. On June 18th, the sky was cloudy, cool, and dreary. Ali still went to the pool and worked her shift alone. It was an overcast day. It wasn't particularly warm. Not a day you really go to the pool. I went to work. Ali later went to the pool. I got home about 5:20. My son Tyler was on the phone with his mother and said that he had gone down to the pool to relieve Ali of her duties. Couldn't find Ali. Roger promptly drove to the pool where Ali was working. The initial thing he noticed was his daughter's vehicle still parked in the lot. He hurried directly into the pool area to look for her. I looked in the pool, looked in the deep end, looked at the bottom. I looked around the grounds. I went over to the baby pool, looked behind it. Then he proceeded to the front desk. There he discovered Ali's cellular phone, her car keys, and her wallet, but not his daughter. Roger walked into the pump room. I went into the pump room and couldn't see very well. And I looked around. I walked to the back of the pump room. I looked behind the pumps, and I was walking out and I turned around and saw a leg sticking out from under a tarp. I lifted the tarp off. But it was Ali. 911, what is your emergency? My daughter's not moving and she's laying in the pool. How old is she? She's 19. There's clear 1729. Oh, Ali. Oh, Ali. Oh, honey. Ali, stay with us. Stay with us. Are you there? She's not moving. She's not moving. Ali, honey, Ali. Does it appear that she's breathing? I can't tell. Roger was in such profound shock that he could not even discern whether his daughter was still breathing. When I found her and I rolled her over. I couldn't believe how brutal it was. Police officers and detectives reached the murder scene almost instantly. Paramedics rushed in only to freeze in horror at the sight of a 19-year-old girl lying unclothed on the cold concrete floor, barely holding on to life. Her body was nearly completely sapped of strength. The scene was both terrifying and unbearably sorrowful. Ali was rushed to the hospital in critical condition. Ali, the most beautiful, innocent, sweetest thing, did absolutely nothing to deserve this. The day Ali was born, it was the happiest and I felt the luckiest day of my life. She was just a wonderful daughter. She was so kind and so sweet. She adored her parents. An exemplary student, obedient, kind-hearted, involved in countless school activities, an honor student. Her high school year, she was involved in like 19 student activities. She was in an honor society. She had all these things going for her. We had felt for years that Ali was going to make a difference in this world. While top physicians fought desperately to save Ali's life, investigators at the scene were uncovering chilling evidence. The pump room was in total disarray. Everything was disturbed and overturned. That pump room was full of a lot of equipment and things. Everything was in disarray. Her flip-flops, which she was wearing, were in different parts of the pump room. There was also blood spatter. It was very evident that Ali had tried to fight her attacker. She had several injuries to her fingers. She had blunt force trauma to her face and the back of her head. We don't know by just looking at the blood stains, Is it all victim's blood? Could it be suspect's blood? At the lab, forensic specialists tested the blood and found that besides Ali's blood, there was blood from a male. Very likely the killer's. However, when they entered the sample into the National DNA database, there were no matches. The investigation began to stall. The police's only remaining option was to locate potential witnesses. At the hospital, Roger stayed up all night waiting outside the operating room for his beloved daughter, uncertain whether she would survive. All her friends and all the people from all over the city were showing up at the hospital. We were just waiting and hoping and just thought some chance she'd pull through. Doctor and a nurse came out and the doctor worked on her and they tried and said she was gone. She died that same day, June 18, 2002. She was only 19 years old. She departed this world forever with so many dreams still unfulfilled. Their hearts were broken beyond what anyone could ever imagine. It's just the most awful feeling in the whole world. We went from the hospital to the funeral home and they took Ally to the morgue. You're dealing with something you don't want to be dealing with. But I went to the morgue and I spent the night at the morgue with Ally and I wasn't going to let her be alone. News of the young girl's death swiftly circulated through the community. Everyone was stunned and heartbroken for Ally, a young, beautiful girl who should never have had to endure such horrific brutality, became a symbol of shared sorrow and outrage for the entire town. The entrance of Foxborough Pool crowded with friends and neighbors paying their respects. Flowers and mementos paid tribute to a young life brought to a violent end. When we were out there covering the story, people just kept showing up. And I hope they find him, the guy that did it. And I hope she didn't suffer long. I have 2 kids, a little boy and a little girl. It's hard to explain, how a mother feels. Everybody knew Ally. She was so popular. They just couldn't believe what had happened. There's a monster loose in our community and we need to get him off the streets. The first time I met Roger Kemp, his face was just the portrait of pain. The first week it's one long horrendous day. Your mind runs everywhere. Who was it? How could this happen? Who could have done something like this? How are you going to ever get this predator tracked down? You have a choice whether you can stay in bed and pull the covers over your head, or you get out and try to make something happen. I had to keep moving. Well, I wanted this guy, and I had made a determination that he had started to fight with Ally, but I was going to finish it. I remember thinking Roger Kemp was an amazing father because he was so driven to find who did this to his daughter. He was such a warrior and a champion for Ally. Roger Kemp appeared on television and did everything possible to raise public awareness about his daughter's case, hoping to assist the police in quickly apprehending her killer. Investigators also accelerated their work because what began as an assault case had now transformed into a brutal murder. The first task they had was to eliminate the people closest to Ali. In any type of case like this, you always have to eliminate family, close friends, boyfriends. That's got to be done right away. The first name that emerged was Phil, Ali's boyfriend. When detectives examined the call log on Ali's phone, they discovered she had called Phil at approximately 2:50 in the afternoon, just over 2 hours before she was found deceased. They also learned that Phil, who had been Ali's boyfriend for 5 years, worked at the same pool and had been on duty during the shift preceding hers. The police promptly brought Phil in for a formal interview at the station. He appeared deeply grief-stricken and haunted by his girlfriend's death. Yet oddly, he still did not fully cooperate initially. He's the last person we know that saw Ally alive. He had told us when interviewed that he had gone to another pool after he had left Ally. He was asked for his DNA and he did provide that. He was really grief-stricken. He was in shock by what had occurred. Say it's difficult at most to deal with the way that Ellie had to die. Phil was a great guy. Roger will tell you when they asked, is there any chance Phil could be involved? He said no way. Phil was 19 years old. They'd been dating for about 5 years. He loved Ally. At the laboratory, the results of Phil's DNA test showed no match with the male blood found with Ali's. Moreover, his statement about working at another pool at the time was verified. Even so, once cleared, Phil provided investigators with an extremely crucial piece of information. According to him, Ali had mentioned she felt like she was being observed. She just said that she was a little worried about people, like when she was by herself. She just said she was worried about people being around there and watching her. She had told her boyfriend that sometimes the people that mowed the grass and did the lawn and garden stuff made her uncomfortable because they stared at her. Her boyfriend came to the pool and she asked him to stay because the lawn and garden people were there and she didn't feel comfortable. That day, Phil had remained at the pool longer with Ali so she would feel safe because the grounds crew was still present. But around 2:15 in the afternoon, Ali told him he could depart because the workers had left. When police questioned the landscaping workers who had been at the pool that day, they stated a brown Ford pickup truck from the 1980s had driven in circles around the parking lot several times before abruptly leaving. Even more disturbing, the workers reported that before Ali was attacked, they had observed a large man sneaking around the pool area. 3 witnesses said he was hiding in the bush near the pool with a camera and appeared to be looking at the girls that were there someday. The circumstances surrounding Ali's death began to come into focus and police received a major break. One of the calls Ali made that day was to a friend asking her to come sit with her so she would not be alone. Detectives suspected this friend might have unknowingly seen the killer. At 3:15, her friend shows up at the pool. She had pulled down into the parking lot, didn't want to get out of her car, so she was just honking her horn to get Ali to come out from inside the little attendant table inside the pool. She noticed a male subject standing there. No, it wasn't anybody that she had described as ever having seen before. White male, probably in his 30s, a little bit of hair, but basically balding. He was carrying a pail and nodded to her and waved. She got scared because she thought it was Ali's boss, and she was going to get Ali in trouble for honking the horn and all that stuff, so she left. The police quickly brought her in to collaborate with a sketch artist and produce a composite drawing of the suspect. The sketch of the man's face was rapidly disseminated across all media outlets in the city, along with the description that he drove an old Ford pickup truck. She was brutally murdered yesterday afternoon. We have a description of that individual, and you will be caught. More than 20 Metro Squad detectives are on the case. They are not sure if the man in the bushes and the one seen at the pool the day of the murder are the same person. Armed with a stack of more than 1,000 copies of the sketch police released today, Ali Kemp's friends are spending hours putting them up all over town. Since her murder 1 week ago, calls have been coming into the hotline. But now that these sketches are out in the public eye, the phone just keeps ringing. 1 week following the murder, calls began to flood the tip line. As soon as the composite sketch was released, the phone rang incessantly. In the initial few days, the police received over 400 leads. The entire community concentrated its attention on finding the killer, but none of the leads progressed anywhere. By July 2002, the Kemp family offered a reward for any information that would help capture the murderer. Tips Hotline has a $1,000 reward for information that leads to a conviction. But Roger Kemp felt like, we need more. We need to get these tips coming in. And so he just kept raising more and more money. We don't want to be off just a little bit because in your minds you think, oh well, it might not be it. You know? Just because it's off just a hair. Please call in those leads. We just needed to catch this guy. We did not want him to victimize anyone else. Not long after, the search expanded nationwide because the composite sketch was shared across major news outlets. Kansas police received calls about suspects from all over the country, but still nothing concrete emerged. Who knows where the guy could have gone by this point? By February 2003, more than 8 months had elapsed since Ali was murdered, and the killer was still at large. The case had no new leads until a familiar name surfaced, James Strader. About 3 or 4 months into the investigation, we got an initial lead on a James Strader who looked a lot like the composite. James Strader is wanted in Missouri and Kansas for brutal rapes and in Leawood, Kansas for questioning about the Ali Kemp murder. Not only did he really resemble the person that we were looking for, but he had a history of abusing women and he became a real person of interest because he took off running. We need to get him into custody to question him in connection with Ali's murder and to get this 3-time convicted felon behind bars. Breaking news erupted when James Strader was arrested following a routine traffic stop in a small Utah town. At last, their suspect was in custody. Get your driver's license administration, please. James Strader was pulled over in Richfield last night. You didn't get gas in Salina? No, I wanted. His arrest came after he allegedly skipped out on paying for gas at this station. I can see the pump from here, and he was the only car out there and he just took off. She called police, and a few minutes later, Strader pulled into the service station in Richfield. Richfield police were waiting for him. Detective Linger, who had been awaiting this moment for so long, immediately flew out to meet Strader face to face. I went out with the detectives from the sheriff's office and spoke with Strader, and he said he didn't do it. The detective heard Strader deny any involvement in Ali's murder repeatedly, but he did not care about the denial. What he required was to know whether Strader's DNA was connected to Ali or not. Linger promptly sent Strader's DNA sample to the lab. But when the results returned, the news was devastating, almost unbelievable. James Strader was not the man who killed Ali. The investigation nearly reached a dead end. I could not believe my ears. Everybody was just absolutely certain it wasn't him. We were totally shocked. Well, I thought that I will never get this high or this low again. You drop to the depths when you don't catch who you're looking for. Roger, throughout the investigation, was extremely afraid that the case would go cold. I'd met families that had terrible tragedies and lost their loved ones, and they turned into a cold case, and it just breaks your heart. My heart was already broken. It's just a place you don't want to be. In the journey to solve a murder, time is always the most fearsome adversary. Every passing minute can erase traces and make the truth harder to uncover. If a murder is not solved within 6 months, the chance it will ever be solved can drop by nearly 50%. By June 18, 2003, exactly 1 year after Ali was killed, Roger was still doing everything possible not to lose hope. But leads were growing scarce and no new information was coming in. Ali's case was slowly fading from the public's memory. One day, while Roger was driving, a bold idea suddenly occurred to him. An idea that would reopen the path forward for the investigation. He recalled, "I was driving down the interstate and I saw a billboard. You have all these eyes that are looking at the billboard, thousands a day. I thought, well, why not? Why couldn't we do this on a billboard? That's the only time anybody's ever come in and say, I want billboards to try to help find the person that killed my daughter." It was a groundbreaking idea. At the time, that kind of thing wasn't being done. To be honest with you, I didn't think it was going to work. That people are driven by him in some cases, and they finally make that phone call and they say, we think maybe you better look at this guy. And you can't put a value on that. I remember just feeling so sad passing those billboards on the highway and knowing he was still out there, but everyone was so hopeful that someone driving by would see it and it would just jog their memory just a little bit that they saw something. As soon as the billboards were erected, tips began pouring in again, this time even more rapidly than before. Only a few days later, the police received the crucial lead they had been hoping for all along. A witness called in about a white man named Ted Hoover, who not only matched the physical description, but also drove an old brown Ford pickup truck. Someone contacted the detectives and provided Hoover's home address. I went up to the house and knocked on the door. The maroon Ford pickup was sitting in the driveway. I went up and knocked on the door and Mr. Hoover answered the door. Couldn't say exactly what he was doing on the day of Ali's homicide. Because of that, I asked him if he would be willing to provide us with some DNA. But Hoover hesitated. He stated he needed to consult a lawyer before deciding whether he would give a DNA sample or not. Obviously, anytime somebody refuses to give you DNA, it makes you a little bit suspicious. At first, Ted Hoover was merely an ordinary suspect. But while police were awaiting his attorney to call back, they suddenly discovered something. Ted Hoover had left the state, which only strengthened their belief that he was connected to Ali. We tried our best to locate Ted Hoover throughout the United States, but he was not in any databases anywhere in the country. Basically, we couldn't find. They contacted the local post office and confirmed that at the address of a woman named Benjamin Abbey, she was currently living with a man. It was possible their suspect had altered his name. They called authorities in the state of Connecticut and requested them to place Benjamin Appleby under surveillance. They called back and said the Teddy Hoover name when we ran that through. We've got some warrants here in Connecticut for indecent exposure on a Teddy Hoover that are several years old. It looks like it is probably going to be the same Teddy Hoover guy that you guys were looking at. The Connecticut State Police agreed to arrest Teddy Hoover. The warrant for indecent exposure in public was executed. Appleby was arrested at this small home on a major thoroughfare in rural Litchfield County by Connecticut State Police on an outstanding warrant. He's wanted here for risk of injury to a minor, disorderly conduct, and public indecency. Appleby was taken for questioning to the state police barracks. It was now November 8, 2004, more than 2 years following the murder of Ali Kemp. At last, investigators had a suspect in custody. They were convinced he was the killer, but without a DNA sample, they still could not be 100% certain. Appleby later recounted, at first, he did not want to give a DNA sample to the Connecticut investigators. Mr. Appleby didn't want to give the DNA to the Connecticut detective. And he said, "What will happen if I don't do it? If I don't consent to this?" And they said, "We'll get it one way or the other." He eventually consented and they got his DNA, but the investigators did not want to wait for the DNA results. What they desired was a confession. When Benjamin Abbey walked into the interrogation room where Kansas State Police investigators were waiting for him, they had staged the room to exert maximum psychological pressure on the killer. We took a wall-sized poster and we put his picture right in the middle, and then around his picture we put everything we could. Think of with arrows pointing down to his picture as to why that's the focus of our investigation. They brought him up to us and he sat down. His eyes got real big and he looked around. He kept looking at that link chart with this picture in the middle and he said, "You know, I kind of lied to you." And we said, "Really? About what?" "Well, I was at that pool. I just remember." Their strategy worked even better than they had hoped. Can you go ahead and tell us what you remember and exact what happened that day? I went in there to the pool with the intentions of looking at the pool to get to business. On June 18, 2002, Ted Hoover, also known as Benjamin Appleby, drove to the parking lot of the neighborhood pool in Leawood. He observed Ali Kemp from a distance, became sexually aroused, and decided to walk up and flirt and joke with Ali. Because he was wearing a pool company uniform, he believed he would not attract suspicion. When Ali went into the pump room, Hoover made his move, and I hit on her small talk. I don't remember exactly what I said. Just wasn't interested in anything I had to say, and I was blocking the doorway. She attempted to walk around him to leave the room. That was when he grabbed her. I tried to hit on her. I touched her not hard, nothing either on the shoulder or the hip or something. She pushed me back and she punched me. Lost it. I took her clothes off with the intention of trying to have sex with her. I don't know how many times I hit her. I hit her back. I hit her in the face. I think it was probably about 10 minutes into the interrogation with him. And my partner, John Dickey, said, "You killed her, didn't you?" And he said, "Yeah, I did. You said she was strangled." I know I strangled her. I don't know what I strangled her with. And I don't know why he did it. After Ali lost consciousness and lay there barely clinging to life, he grabbed a nearby blue tarp, covered her body with it, and left the scene, abandoning her to her fate. It was a crime beyond forgiveness. I just laid it on her. I didn't want anybody to find her like that, but I didn't think she was dead. They said, "Have me confession?" And I heard all about the details, and I knew we had the guy killed her, so he wouldn't have a witness and he wouldn't go to jail again. In November 2005, Ted Hoover was brought to trial for rape and first-degree murder in the killing of Ali Kemp. On December 5th, after only 2 hours of deliberation, the jury delivered its verdict. On the first charge of capital murder, we the jury find the defendant guilty. We have justice. Just want him put away and never want him back out on the streets again. Benjamin Appleby, formerly known as Ted Hoover, was sentenced to 50 years to life in prison with no possibility of parole until the year 2054. Though, nothing could bring his daughter back. At last, Roger Kemp could let his beloved Ali rest in peace. Roger was such a devoted father. We may never solve this crime without Roger. To be honest with you, Roger just never gave up. He became the spokesperson for every father out there. My wife and I realized that we never wanted this to happen to another little girl again. We wanted to do a self-defense class for girls. We call it Take Defense. The Ali Kemp Educational Foundation. We had our first class in the basement of Leawood City Hall. We had 12 people in it. We've had 68,000 people go through our classes now, and we have women that have contacted us and said, "Your program saved my life. I don't care how many people we teach, but if we teach 100,000 and we save one life, it's worth it." Roger partnered with law enforcement to launch a nationwide billboard campaign featuring wanted criminals. This campaign has brought new hope to many unsolved cases and has assisted families of victims who had long been forgotten. I have never met a person like Roger Kemp. The President of the United States invited him to the White House and recognized him during a ceremony. Roger Kemp lived every father's worst nightmare when his daughter Ali was taken at a young age. Through immeasurable pain and grief, Roger devoted his energy to building a safer world for future generations. His foundation has provided women of all ages with valuable self-defense training. And his billboard campaign to post the faces of wanted criminals has led to multiple arrests, including the conviction of Ali's killer. The United States honors Roger Kemp for his unwavering efforts to ensure the safety of his fellow citizens. This certainly is not the way we wanted Ali to make a difference in the world. But I'm very, very proud of her, and I hope she would like what we're doing. Hope she'd be proud, and I think she would be. They couldn't save Ali, but they have saved many women. And that's Ali's legacy. Though the tragedy of that year stole Ali Kemp from the world at the age of 19, the light she carried has never extinguished. From unimaginable pain, Her father rose up and turned his family's loss into a force that protects others. The self-defense classes, the wanted criminal billboards, and the countless lives saved are the legacy ally left behind. She is no longer here in person, but her kindness, courage, and love live on through everything her parents have done in her name. It is proof that even in the deepest sorrow, human beings can create hope and leave a mark that never fades.